Every time you board a plane, you hear it. The same voice. Calm. Measured. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We're cruising at 36,000 feet. Weather looks smooth ahead. Sit back and enjoy the flight. Reassuring. Professional. Almost scripted. Because honestly, it kind of is. But what you never hear is what's actually being said in that locked room at the front of the plane. The real conversation. The one between two pilots, alone together, for 8, 10, sometimes 14 hours straight. No passengers. No cabin crew. Just them. A wall of instruments and a whole lot of sky. The language they use sounds nothing like what comes through your speakers. And some of it you'd find genuinely surprising. Let's start with something most passengers don't even know exists. Below 10,000 feet, during takeoff and landing, pilots are legally not allowed to have non-essential conversation. It's called the sterile cockpit rule. The FAA introduced it in 1981 after accident. Investigators kept finding the same pattern. Crews were talking about something unrelated right before trouble. No weekend plans. No sports scores. Nothing that isn't directly about flying the aircraft. The cockpit goes deliberately, intentionally quiet. This is also why flight attendants stop moving and strap in during approach. The entire operation shifts into a different mode. Everyone focuses. The sterile cockpit isn't a suggestion, it's federal aviation regulation. On every single flight, there's a series of verbal callouts. V1. That's the speed past which you can no longer safely abort the takeoff. The pilot monitoring, usually the first officer, calls it. Not because the other pilot doesn't know. They both know. It's a shared acknowledgement. A verbal commitment. We are going. Rotate. The speed at which the nose lifts. Called. Confirmed. Positive rate. The aircraft is climbing. Gear up. The response. These aren't just habits or tradition. They're a system specifically designed for the moments when the human brain is most likely to make errors. High workload, high stakes, compressed time. The call-outs force both pilots into total sync, word by word, second by second. If one call doesn't come when it should, the other pilot notices immediately. That delay itself is information. Something isn't right. That's the entire point. Modern cockpit conversation is built around structured, respectful challenge. It's a deliberate design decision based on accident data. Here's something that genuinely changed aviation, and it came from one of the worst days in the history of flight. In 1977, two Boeing 747s collided on a runway in Tenerife. 583 people died. It remains the deadliest accident in aviation history. The KLM aircraft initiated takeoff without clearance. The first officer had concerns. He raised them, but not forcefully enough. The captain proceeded. After Tenerife, the industry looked hard at cockpit communication culture. What they found wasn't unique to that crew. It was everywhere. First officers were deferring to captains even when something felt wrong, because the captain was, essentially, untouchable. You just didn't push back. So Crew Resource Management, CRM, was developed and eventually mandated across the industry. The core idea is radical in its simplicity. The first officer isn't just a backup pilot. They're a required voice. They're specifically trained to say, "I'm not comfortable with this." The training involves simulated scenarios where the right answer requires the first officer to push back, hard, against a captain making a mistake. It's difficult to practice. It goes against instinct. But it's now a core component of pilot training worldwide. Modern conversation is structured. Pilots also speak in a language engineered specifically for zero ambiguity. There's the phonetic alphabet: Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, and so on. Every letter gets a dedicated word. This exists because certain letters sound dangerously similar over a degraded radio signal. Which is which? The phonetic alphabet eliminates that problem entirely. Every letter becomes unmistakable. ATC clears a crew to descend and maintain level 240. That dense instruction gets processed and read back correctly in seconds. Every word has a specific meaning. Cleared for takeoff is unique. Cleared for takeoff and line up and wait are not interchangeable. Confusing them has contributed to fatal accidents. The language strips out everything vague. No, I think, no, probably. But between the two pilots themselves, it's more human. Fuel state, weather, system checks, but also philosophy. Philosophy at 38,000 feet is not uncommon. There's also a hierarchy of urgency that most people have only heard in movies. Mayday, repeated 3 times, declares immediate danger to life. The aircraft is in serious trouble right now. Every other frequency goes quiet. Every controller in range is listening. Pan, also 3 times, signals urgency without immediate danger. Something is wrong. Assistance may be needed. These phrases were chosen because they're unambiguous across any language barrier. Most passengers will never hear either word on an actual flight. When turbulence ahead is reported severe, real turbulence, the cockpit conversation shifts. Short, specific, terse. Both pilots know what to do. When a system warning triggers, a hydraulic pressure light, there's no panic. There's a checklist. One reads, one confirms. Every single step. Hydraulic system A, low pressure. Confirmed. Isolating. Isolated. It's almost meditative. The procedure prevents the brain from skipping steps under stress. Under stress, the brain absolutely will skip steps if you let it. The checklist doesn't allow that. The version of aviation you experience is carefully constructed. The calm voice. The measured tone. The nothing to worry about, even when there is, technically, something being actively worked through. What sits underneath that is a communication system built from hard experience, from accidents, from the realization that human failure is dangerous. Next time you're at 36,000 feet and that familiar voice comes through, steady, unhurried, reassuring. Remember what's ahead. There's an entirely different conversation happening. More precise, more collaborative, more human than you might expect. You're just not on that frequency. The checklist doesn't allow that. The version of aviation you experience as a passenger is carefully constructed. The calm voice, the measured tone, the nothing to worry about, even when there is, technically, something being actively worked through. What sits underneath that is a communication system built from hard experience, from accidents, from the realization of human failure. Human beings failing to talk to each other correctly, or not talking at all, can be as dangerous as any mechanical failure. Next time you're at 36,000 feet, and that familiar voice comes through the speakers, steady, unhurried, reassuring, remember this. There's an entirely different conversation happening just a few meters ahead of you. More precise, more collaborative, more human than you might expect. You're just not on that frequency. Every word spoken in that small room is a layer of your safety built over decades. Behind every smooth flight announcement is a rigid protocol, a language that doesn't allow for maybe or I think. Only facts. They monitor the fuel, the weather, and each other, especially each other, because even the best technology needs a human check. It's a culture where rank matters less than reality, where the youngest officer has the duty to speak up and be heard. That is the secret frequency of flight, a symphony of checklists and call-outs that keeps the world moving safely through the clouds. The silence in the cabin is only possible because of the noise of precision in the cockpit. Understanding this changes how you fly. Aviation is a world of hidden wonders. Subscribe to AmazingNearby to discover more stories happening right next to you. Communication is the ultimate safety net. It's what turns a group of people into a life-saving team. Fly with confidence. Thanks for joining us today. Stay safe, keep looking up, and I'll see you very soon. Goodbye.